So our first context corner is being given by Ashley King, and another little assistant. Yes. And Ashley is completing a dissertation at UNC on religious matters in the 18th century? 19th century novel. And she has also written on curates, and she's spoken to us before. So we're all looking forward to hearing from Ashley this morning.
Thank you. All right. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming here early this morning. So we're going to go ahead and start off our context corners for discussion. Can you guys hear me okay? Hearing's good? Okay. All right, I'll make sure I project teacher voice today. All right, so in discussing ordination and livings in 19th century England, I thought it would be best to first define what these key terms mean. In the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church, ordination is not a set of educational or documentary requirements, but the rite of consecration, essentially the blessing by which a person becomes a Christian minister. Whereas a living is an ecclesiastical office in which the incumbent is required to perform certain duties or conditions of a spiritual kind while being supported by the revenues attached to the office. Within the context of the Church of England, this is simply an ecclesiastical parish under a clergyman. A living is also called a benefice. Now, turning our attention to ordination specifically, I think we can probably agree that Jane Austen tends to skim over the finer points of ordination in her novel Mansfield Park, even though this is her most religious piece of fiction. So the question becomes, what did ordination actually look like for a prospective 19th century clergyman like Edmund Bertram? Bertram. Forgive me, it's early. Now, to prepare a prospective clergyman for his future professional life, a young man would receive a university education at Cambridge or Oxford. Upon graduating from university, the graduate then have until he was at least 23 years old to be ordained, because that was the minimum age for ordination. Before this prospective clergyman could request ordination, he needed to have a title and orders in hand. That is, the promise of a clerical position that will follow ordination. Without the living, which of course I'll explain in more detail here in a minute, a clergyman had no hope of financial support. Such are the sentiments of the wonderful Mary Crawford when she declares that it would be absolute madness to take orders without a living. Once a prospective clergyman had found a position to serve, he would have to write the bishop of the diocese that he planned to serve, indicating his intention for ordination. The bishop would reply with a letter of instruction, listing all the requirements, sometimes including a list of readings. The receipt of the letter, of course, would then actually be followed by a personal interview with that bishop. About a month before the bishop's examination, the prospective clergyman would provide the following documents, which I've included up here. A baptismal certificate, evidence of his intention to apply for ordination had actually been announced in his home church, title of orders, evidence of his academic preparation, and testimonials of his moral fitness. Examinations by bishops for ordination varied in difficulty. Groups of candidates within the diocese would be examined at the same time. The period of the exam would usually run between a Thursday and Saturday, with the ordination ceremonies culminating on a Sunday. The exams consisted of both written and oral sections set and evaluated by said bishop. While the exams were relatively easy, candidates still failed and unfortunately had to be rejected for those positions. Now, those who succeeded would sign the 39 Articles, the central defining statement of the Anglican doctrine that was established back in the 16th century, and would then be ordained by the bishop. The ordination service that a prospective clergyman would have undergone can be found in the 1662 edition of the Book of Common Prayer. After the service, he would be officially a deacon and assume the honorary title, the Reverend. The deacon would serve 1 year before becoming eligible to be priested, and essentially that's another term for saying be ordained as a priest. During this year, which served as a probationary period, a deacon would perform many of the usual duties of a clergyman, except the sacrament of the Eucharist, also known as communion or the Lord's Supper. Ordination to the priesthood involved another set of oral and written exams, followed by yet another ordination ceremony. Now I recognize this meme has absolutely nothing to do with the talk, but I thought it was funny. We need some humor early in the morning. See, I knew this would win with this crowd. I knew it would. Okay. So moving on to our next major point, I want to give everyone here a sense of the disparity between livings and how these livings were given within the Church of England's patronage system. So what, you may ask, were the types of livings available in the 19th century? Well, I'm here to answer that. So here we go. So a rector was a priest of a church in a parish that was self-supporting. Essentially that meant that his income was derived from the great tithes. So these included things like the cereal crops and the small tithes on all other farm products, as well as income from church land. A vicar would be a church in a parish that was not self-supporting. His income was only derived from the small tithes and church land. Lastly, a curate could be hired by a clergyman to assist him with the overwhelming duties of a large parish, or essentially serve in his stead as the resident clergyman for the parish. Salaries for curates tended to be really low, only around 50 to 120 pounds a year. The 1813 Stipendiary Curates Act set a minimum salary for around about 80 pounds. However, this really didn't actually benefit a lot of curates, since the competition was so stiff for these livings that oftentimes curates would settle for below 80 pounds because they just were so desperate for a living. Oftentimes curacy was seen as a stepping stone to higher office, but a lot of times it didn't actually lead to higher office, because once again, these livings competition was so stiff for them. In the country parishes of Jane Austen's novels, clergymen's income came mainly from the glebe, which is an area of land which was donated to the church by faithful parishioners for the benefit of the incumbent, and tithe, which is the right of the clergy to receive a tenth of the annual gross product of all cultivated land in the parish. In some parishes, the glebe consisted of a mere field, while in others it could amount to 60 acres or more. It's really important to note that the majority of around 10,000 parishes in Jane Austen's time were tiny. During the discussion in Parliament in 1802, it was attended that 1,000 of these livings in the country were worth less than 100 pounds a year, while 3,000 were worth around 100 to 150 pounds. This amount, of course, was seen as not enough to support a single man, let alone a family. But as we learn in Mansfield Park, livings could be significantly better. According to Henry Crawford, Edmund's future living is worth around 700 pounds a year. Jane Austen's own father, who I have pictured here, of course, was able to earn closer to 600 pounds by the end of his career through 2 livings, as well as teaching pupils in his own home. Of course, livings could also be bought and sold. In order to cover his older son's debt, Sir Thomas is forced to sell the living at Mansfield to Dr. Grant. In Sense and Sensibility, John Dashwood is shocked to learn that from Eleanor, that Colonel Brandon has given Edward Ferrars a living when he could have sold it for 1,400 pounds. While private citizens controlled livings, church authorities, colleges, and important public schools, as I've listed here, and even the king or queen actually controlled livings in the Church of England as well. Patrons then were a person or an institution with the right to grant a benefice to a member of the clergy, and these patrons often had different motivations for placing certain clergymen in their parishes. Usually patrons could offer their livings to a younger son or another relative, yet there could be exceptions to this type of patronage. Moved by Edward Ferrars' story, Colonel Brandon, who I have pictured here, of course, it offers Edward the small living under his control, even though he admits to barely knowing Edward. In Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Collins enjoys the fortunate chance of being recommended to Lady Catherine de Bourgh, the patroness of Hunsford Parsonage, while never explicitly stated in the text, you cannot help but wonder if Lady Catherine de Bourgh's love of deference and control led her to choose the malleable and eager to please Mr. Collins as her parish priest. So Austen is clearly invested in depicting the importance of religious practice in 19th century life through the private and public lives of her characters. My hope, of course, this weekend is that you all will continue to discuss clergy, ordination, livings, and everything in between throughout the wonderful weekend ahead of us. Thank you.